Talks about. I am fine, and this is gonna be fun, like all of like all the DTAs. I should probably say that more. That's the acronym for Der Talks about, by the way, DTA. That's what I call them. And that's why I call the video files before uploading to YouTube. But anyway, so today we're talking about, well, my latest arts, the schematic for the pixel art schematic of the USS Porto Rico BB-66. And why there are battleships in my sci-fi setting, and why there should be, and why the United States military, and why the United States Navy needs to get on building battleships as soon as possible. If it plans to fight China in the near future, which, according to our illustrious president, probably not, because he don't want to. Although that's just my opinion on that bit, but it's not really my opinion on the fact that battleships need to return and probably should have never left. So, in this video, we're going to go over a few points. What made battleships obsolete, in quotation marks? Why is this situation different from the last couple of decades, ever since, frankly, the end of World War One? And how should they return? So, first off, why do people think battleships are obsolete? Well, beyond the fact that no one built them since the end of World War II, no one barely built them during the war. It could also be the fact that the Yamato got sunk, and its friends, and the Shinano, which was based off the Yamato. Could be based off the fact Pearl Harbor happened, and that's like a lot of battleships. It could be that battleships never got battleship-to-battleship kills during the war. It could be a lot of things. But to me, what it boils down to is simply this. The battleships got outranged. The guns that people were comfortable with putting on a floating building that can move across an unstable surface known as the ocean, the battleships, I guess you could say, were an evolution of the concept of the original surface combat by modern terms. You know, a ship that was ram of the ships, which was used in the classical times, but the original surface combat, which came around with the cannon and the invention of gunpowder. That took the Royal Navy from being an elite taxi force to being an elite combat force. So, yeah, and the battleship is the final evolution of the artillery ship. There was nothing else you can do with an artillery ship, a purebred artillery ship, other than make a dreadnought, and then the lesser form of a dreadnought, a battleship. Which my definition of a dreadnought is strictly big guns, nothing else. And it has big armor, and it has enough speed to keep up with the fleet. Because a monitor is something that which is like the USS Monitor, the first turreted ironclad, let's say, and probably the first ship with a turret on it, despite being undergunned to the extreme, although it didn't really matter at the time. But still, because what does the amount of guns matter in firepower if you're invincible? More or less invincible. Except to storms and ocean. And your seagoing wasn't very good. But anyway, so monitors were the first step to the modern sense of a battleship, not the modern sense of an artillery, of a surface combatant, which is defined by the U.S. military as a ship that's on top of the ocean that has guns and does most of its damage with guns and missiles. Not planes, not mines, not anything else. So, yeah. But anyway. So, going up for the monitor with its weak sauce armor and slow speed and barely a seagoing vessel. None of them were really seagoing. Or ocean-going, I should say. That will lead on to, that will eventually advance to time until we get to basically the end of the line with Iowas. Then the end of the line until what I think should be now. In the line with the Iowas and the Yamatos and the Montanas and and the German Plan C ships and all the Tier 10 battleships you see in World War ships. So what went wrong? Essentially what went wrong? Again, I think it's more boiled down to a popular conception than anything that the battleships actually did. And because the countries that survived the war are civilian governments which are very opinionated, to say the least, even back then. Hearing stories about the battleships, about the Iowa and the Yamato staying away from each other and basically playing the no touchy game, seeing how far yet how close to each other they can get without actually interacting, and just how underwhelming the battleships sea-to-sea kills were during the war. It's easy to see why people in the modern day and even during the war and after would see them as useless. They were expensive, cost as much to maintain as a carrier of equivalent size, I would say. But in their eyes, didn't actually kill enemy ships. Which is kind of odd. Because they did a ton of damage to land targets. And they are cheaper to run against land targets by far. Because yes, the dumb bomb, and I do emphasize dumb bomb, is as cheap as, or is around the same value as a gigantic 100-something odd inch shell, or even millimeter shell. But unlike the battleship, which can carry a lot more bullets or shells, a lot more rounds, can stay engaged in combat a whole lot longer than modern day missile cruisers, or missile boats, or missile destroyers, or whatever Russia does. And also it can stay on task on a patrol up and down a coast, just pummeling targets all day long, while getting reload every so often. Whereas the most modern cruiser, its competitor in the U.S. Navy would have to get reloads like every 5 seconds. Ticonderoga's, the most modern cruiser, the biggest surface combatant the U.S. Navy has, only has essentially a single engagement's worth of ammo. It never reloads. It only reloads. I don't know if it can reload at sea. I would assume so, but it can't. But let's say it's reloads at sea. But when would you get an opportunity to do that in the middle of fighting an enemy fleet? You wouldn't. And not only that, some of your missile tubes are dedicated to intercepting enemy missiles, and the other half, let's say, is dedicated to doing damage to the enemy target. You actually have your gun, But really, is it really supposed to be using its gun all that often? It can't bombard with its gun. If it wants to take place in a shore bombardment mission, it would need to basically get extremely close to the enemy shore and just blink at things. To be fair, just deploying an Abrams and a Bradley would probably be cheaper, wouldn't you think? Out of an amphibious carrier, or out of a amphibious assault ship, than sending an entire supercarrier like a Nimitz or a Jill or a Ford. Then sending a Ticonderoga or a whatever destroyer we have at the moment. I don't know them. I always call them cruisers and destroyers in my life, and I never really quite could tell the difference between their classes. But anyway, the modern ships. And any cruisers and destroyers, really. Heavy cruisers, different. I can actually tell heavy cruisers apart. But anyway, heavy cruisers, battle cruisers, and the like. But anyway, so... yeah. So, basically, that's it. The battleship is the ultimate shore bombardment vessel. You could argue, oh, why don't we just use submarines? Good luck! They only carry so many missiles, and they can't reload at sea. I mean, I guess they could, but that would be risky. Kind of being the purpose of submarine, and like, unless you have submersible, to reload a submarine at sea, it not having any surface ships, which some people are arguing just go submarines for the entire Navy, which would be stupid for various reasons. What about Haiti, man? What about the Haitians with earthquakes and such? And only that carriers are useful for just putting them down on the coastal, on the sea region next to an enemy state and just living it there and just see what happens. As well as transferring troops. Marines like them. Marines ride on them sometimes. Good for transferring aircraft. And carriers are good for, well, deploying aircraft and gaining air superiority. When was the last time you saw a submarine gain air superiority? I mean, which, by the way, you can gain air superiority with SAM sites. It's just no one does that. More area denial, I would think, is what it would be called. But still, when was the last time you saw a submarine do that? And then also, like, people are arguing, put hypersonic missiles on container ships and just make hypersonic, essentially a battleship with only hypersonic missiles. That's heavily armored and is either cheap, dirt cheap, and just basically just a ton of cheap missile racks, basically a sea Katusha, or basically make a battleship with missile tubes instead. The issue with making a Katusha at sea is really cheap. Like, do you want to keep your expensive missiles on a really cheap thing that dies easily? Like, let's say each missile you have is $1 million, and I don't think that's the cost of a hypersonic missile. I really don't think so. But let's just say, for this point, if every missile on your cheap little cheap little ship, let's say it's 100 meters long, is $1 million, and you have a missile tube every square meter of that, or every square meter of that ship. So you have roughly, how much? So you have 5,000 missiles. So that's that's a couple of $1 trillion. There's something around there. Well, what if that gets sunk? Which it will get sunk, because a gunboat can go up next to it and scratch and just ram it, and it just dies. It could get hit by these hypersonic missiles because you didn't see that launch site. It could get sniped at by a Chinese stealth bomber. It could die to a space-to-ground weapon. now say like with a gun, it could die to a lot of things. It could die to artillery, it could die to a destroyer, it could die to a fisherman with an RPG, it could die to a lot of things, and you lose a ton of money. The heavily armored carries missiles is kind of stupid too. Why not build a battleship at that point with artillery if you're going to basically just make a missile ship, not just a missile boat but an actual missile ship? It's kind of pointless, and you still need to get real loads. Because there's no ship I know of that has spare ammo for its missile tubes. I don't think so. So you can be innovative in that regard, or just use a battleship. Which again, going back to why battleships were deemed obsolete, again, it was just because they just had less range than a carrier at that time. Not because they were cheaper, because they weren't for shore bombardment. And guess what we've been doing for the past 100, ever since the end of World War, ever since the end of World War I. What have we been doing with our ships? Shore bombardment. We have barely shot at other ships. We might have in the Cold War. Then we brought out battleships. Why? Because battleships are heavily armored. A Russian missile barrage would just effectively sink the battleship, but then what are the two carriers on its flank's gonna do? Launch more planes to kill the now empty Russian battle group. Or they go after the carriers and then they have to deal with a battleship slowly coming after them, and they can slowly run away, but they're out of ammo. So, like, what could they do when you pull out an Iowa? Not only that, you can give a battleship missiles. You can totally give a battleship missiles. It's not against the rules. The only thing against the rules is it's taking away its guns. Then it's a missile ship. So, yeah. And we'll get into this depiction, my depiction of what a future battleship would look like. Or a modern battleship would look like. So, we'll get that a little bit later. But, actually, let's do this. There. But, yeah, I mean, like, when hasn't a battleship been useful? They've been expensive, but so are supercarriers. And that doesn't even begin with the fact that battleships are cheaper to run because they don't have planes on the carrier. And what is a carrier without planes? It's Russian. Or Chinese. Or British, actually. It's also British. It's a lot of things, but it's not an aircraft carrier. It is simply it's simply a transport net vessel with some anti-air guns. So, yeah, so during World War II, battleships were insane. Battleships were everywhere. They were doing shore bombardment. They were attacking other vessels. That was the destroyers and the carriers' jobs. Which they got all the glory, and now we don't have battleships, and we could really use them. So World War II happened. Battleships' glory got taken by the carriers, but they were still useful. During the Cold War, they would have been useful for, again, shore bombardment and absorbing Soviet nonsense. Especially late in the Cold War when we got our battleships back. Then it comes down to the global war on terror. I think that's the only period in time where battleships would not have been useful due to the landlocked nature of all our enemies at that time. The battleships were frankly outranged for an absolute fact then. They weren't outranged in Korea. They weren't outranged in Vietnam. But they are. I think they were outranged in Libya. They weren't, but they were outranged in Afghanistan for sure, and they were outranged in Iraq. I think, unless they were used in Iraq, they might be used in Iraq. But they were definitely outranged in Afghanistan. They're outranged in Africa. And they're outranged in China. But that comes down to my future concept of a battleship. Sorry, this video has been kind of all around the point, so I'm just trying to get my thoughts out there. If you want to discuss in the comments, so please let me know. But I mean, like there is no battleships are obsolete reason that I know of, that I personally know of, that the Porto Rico class, the super battleships in their story, does not fix. For one, let's look at the Chad railgun battleship is what I tend to call them, because that makes a better point than just saying super battleship, which they technically are because they're huge. But these are the points that you need in your modern battleship. You need a hyper-ranged weapon, something that can shoot over, let's say, 300 miles to 300 miles to intercontinental. Anywhere between there, it's hyper-ranged. Guess what can be hyper-ranged and what cannot? Modern aircraft carriers have a limited range. Hypersonics can reach out to them, but they cannot reach out to the hypersonics. However, if you want a hypersonic, there are a few other battleships have means of making hypersonics now, whereas carriers are hard pressed to. There are ways to get aircraft carriers' ranges up. For example, have a tanker that will extend your range better than what we currently have now. Have a plane that's specifically designed to interdict hypersonic missiles, etc. But those are all expensive, and we don't have them right now. What we do have is a ton of these cruiser guns. These Mark 45 Mod 4s turrets, which are off of cruisers, Ticonderogas. They can be equipped with a 127mm hybrid hybrid rocket powered propel shell that can reach out a few hundred to a couple thousand miles. I forgot which, but it's super ridiculous. It's beyond the range of your Hornets and your F-35s definitely, and all the rest. Maybe they're around base, maybe they're not the F-15, but I don't know. But definitely anything that goes on the ship, because if it goes on the ship is supposed to move the ship is supposed to move with it and be a moving base. That's the whole idea about naval aviation. Problem is, when everyone's at range, you go back to the battleship. You go back to the popular battleships obsolete problem of getting outranged. So, the simplest thing you do, and the U.S. military has pondered this already, is just stick these hybrid gunpowder propelled shells onto a carrier or onto anything, because the Army's still working on theirs, and thank goodness they are. And the Army, in all its infinite wisdom, which it probably has wisdom, decided, you know what we can do when we're fighting China and the carriers are outranged? We're going to put artillery on the carrier and counter battery the hypersonic missiles. Now, let me give you a second to think about that in the context of this discussion. Have any ideas? Anything percolating? You're putting big guns, or medium-sized guns, they're not much bigger than these turrets, onto a carrier. Onto a flight deck. Onto the middle of a flight deck. If you've never seen how a carrier operates, let me explain. There is no place on the carrier's flight deck that you could put a gun, an artillery, and a field gun, a field piece, whatever you want to call it, field artillery, and total artillery, and have it not obstruct the operations of the carrier. So what does that make the carrier? Yes, it makes it a battleship. In the crudest way possible, the Army, Navy, carrier, battle carrier, big gun thing is just a battleship in disguise. Except it has none of the features of a battleship, which makes battleships awesome. Such as near infinite ammo. Such as ammo enough for a battle, if we were to use terms found in Command & Conquer. It wouldn't have armor, as much armor or survivability as a battleship, old or new. It won't have the integrated systems to counter battery anything really, or really fight other ships if need be. It's a good idea. It just isn't as good of an idea. It's gonna stopgap measure. I'm glad that someone is thinking about this up top in the Department of Defense, but it will not win you the war. It will stop you from losing the war, but it will not win you the war. What will win you the war is something like this Puerto Rico class. What makes this Puerto Rico class special, in this, not only in the setting but potentially but as a future concept, is it combines the best of most U.S. Pretty much all of the U.S. surface combatants plus the carriers. As in, it combines the carrier with sheer girth, size, as that, and it looks like it. Well, basically, there was a Gerald Ford at dry dock, and I matched the color and basically feel to that, as well as the Zewalt carrier, as this thing's supposed to be moderate. It's supposed to have a stealthy shape, even though it's not stealthy at all. No, just anything helps. Because like that, but it takes its sheer girth from an aircraft carrier, and it's supposed to be the key point in a battle group. It's not supposed to be spammed or anything. You're not supposed to have these artillery fleets sailing, although you totally could. There's no reason not to if you really want to bombard China back into the Stone Age where it belongs. The Industrial Revolution has been kind to China and the Chinese people, although the communism has not. But anyway, so what makes this special is it has the size of a carrier. You can safely ignore that 500 meter size. That's easily that's almost twice as long from that to that as a Nimitz class. I can safely ignore it. It can be scaled down or scaled up. It doesn't matter. The high power plants obviously needs to be nuclear. The bigger it is, the bigger its power plant, and it's gonna need it. It doesn't necessarily need 6 independent turning motors or jets, whatever it is. Did I put 6? It actually show 9. Oh, that's my bad. Okay, that's an error. Need to work out. I also need to work out that a little pixel. Okay, I might need to edit this eventually. But anyway. So that's 9 of these motors. They can push it in a full circle around the ocean pretty easily, just by sheer girth. Which, by the way, I should mention its depth. No. This part, the red part, is actually bowed out. Like the torpedo, like the traditional torpedo armor of old, of the interwar ships. In between World War I and World War II, during that modernization, it has a more bulging shape. It's primarily to do with the recoil of its primary gun, but it's also privileged to hold components related to maintaining the gun, holding ammo, and all that. So it's not as fast as it could be if it was a modern carrier shape, but then again, you got tons of engines to just push it forward if you need to go fast. and it needs to go side to side in order to aim because it can't wiggle its gun side to side. It has to basically move the entire ship side to side. So if your enemies are crossing the T, you need to essentially straight with it while turning, while going forward in order to keep having a shot on it. Which you don't need to do this, by the way. You can have a traditional multi-turreted, a multi-gun turret design of a battleship, but I would rather have a single or multiple big gun than having tiny little big gun. Tiny little baby's big gun. And that's when we get to the big gun. Now, the reason why you want a big gun is for encountering other gigantic surface combatants, making sure nothing you shoot, making sure nothing you point at lives after you kill it to death. Making sure there is no anything living at the end of it, and you can always load it with canister rounds or anything like that, scatter shot, or what do you call it with nukes? The ability for it to separate. You can also MIRV round it. You can do a lot of things. You don't need to have a massive shot that just wipes anything off the surface of the planet whenever you click your mouse button. No, you don't need that. You can be more versatile on that. In case you don't want that, a modern railgun battleship would make me happy if it was just armor and these things. Just tons of Mark 45 Mod 4 turrets loaded up with hybrid rocket powder propelled rounds, meant to just pepper a target to death. That would work. Name one Chinese hypersonic platform that isn't extremely vulnerable to attack. Once they're exposed, either by satellite, recon, spies, or you're counter battering it, because rockets are insanely obvious when they go off. When they come for you, all it needs to dodge or absorb the hit, because it's a battleship, it can absorb the hit. And then you counter batter it to death. Which, again, bigger is better because you can hold more of these turrets. Which, there's not even just turrets on this side, there's turrets on the other side. Then going on to defenses, possible defenses, you can either use just plain fighting sea whizzes, just a ton of them to mimic your 50 cals and your whatever, your anti-aircraft / mixed guns of old on your classic Iowas. Or bigger is better, just have a ton of them. No, ton of them strictly for those Iranian gunboats, making sure they just get deleted whenever they try attacking you from the side. Essentially, the only side defenses, you can use the Mach 45s, or you can use the Sea Whizzes, whatever you need to. Which the Puerto Rico almost never uses the Sea Whizzes because of its barrier, which isn't going to be anything, which, much to the Air Force's dismay, isn't going to be a thing anytime soon. Although the Navy is working on something that's close to it, something I like to, for the Gerald R. Ford class, which basically is a plasma barrier, which is basically what amounts to the Star Trek Enterprise polarized hull plating, where you basically sheathe your outer hull in plasma. So when a rocket comes and interacts with your hull, it's just going to dissipate, because plasma versus plasma equals nothing. So basically, give that technology to your battleship. It helps with the carrier too, except the flight deck is doomed, because I don't think you can do that to your flight. I don't think you can polarize your flight deck plating, because people walk on that, But to a battleship, when people aren't going to be walking on your deck in the 21st century, if you ever looked at the zoo, people don't walk on that deck. Submarines, people don't walk on that deck. Tanks, people don't walk on that deck. I know there are exceptions, but during battle, people don't walk on that deck. So I propose that a railgun battleship or modern battleship does not have a deck. I mean, it will probably need a deck to recover drones. That's a VTOL pad to recover drones. But anywhere else, not a deck. Make it like a tank. I'm sorry, my throat's really, really dry and scratchy. But yeah, make it like a tank. Make it insanely thick, as thick as you can get away with, without compromising internal space or your capabilities of your weapons. But enough that you can survive an entire barrage from all the Chinese hypersonic missiles. That'd be hilarious. Because being invincible never hurt anyone in war. It just makes you scream, "Fight me!" against your enemies as they casually walk away from you. So yeah. And also doesn't necessarily need to be a pyramid. Being a low angle pyramid. No, like this and this. I prefer that because armor angling is boss. Armor angling is beast. Armor angling is life. Also, by the way, this comes to a point. It comes to a plateau. So it slopes up at a certain angle. I don't know what angle it slopes out at, but it slopes this way, slopes that way, and it basically comes up at an angle. This guy also uses a laser grid too, as its majority of its defense. When it's not carrying behind its barrier, it hits still in the laser turrets. But truly, the only thing you actually need, like, if you're an admiral or if you're an admiral or someone in the United States Navy or Congress watching this video, there are two things you need. There are two things you can take away from this design and can build right now and something right this second to build Battleship. It could be 100 meters long, it could be a mile long, it could be a million miles, it could be 1,000 kilometers long. It does not matter. We just need at least one. We just need a ton of Mod 45 turrets with hybrid rocket powder propelled shells and armor. Preferably speed to keep up with the Nimitz and the 4 class, but still, if it's the key in the formation flanked by carriers, if it's the thing flanking carriers, if it's the thing escorting carriers, does not matter. If it's the thing going out there and just pummeling enemy shores, just being annoyance because it's invincible, and what are they gonna do? AKA the U.S. Monitor from the Civil War. What are they gonna do? If it's going to be that way, whatever you want it to do, it will be able to do it. Because the key for a conflict against China, or really any modern conflict, because no one at the freaking Navy besides the United States anymore, really, to be honest, let's be fair. Especially our enemies. I mean, yes, France has an actual navy. Britain, I think, has a navy. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth is okay, but there's only one of them. So yeah, like what surface bounds are we fighting that would be better served with dueling with carriers or with naval aviators dogfighting each other? And I haven't mentioned that if your sensors, if your target acquisition and and if your sensors and computers are up to snuff, you could probably start playing to rail guns on the ground. You very well could. You just need to know where the plane is. You just need to know what heading is on, and just start spamming bullets and start spamming rods at it. What I call railgun bullets. And again, my throat's really dry and sore and everything, so I'm gonna wrap this up shortly. Yeah, water doesn't help me actually hydrate for some reason. They just don't. But anyway, so that's pretty much this video. We just need, well, essentially, to boil down what we need out of this entire discussion is we need range and armor. You can't get that from a carrier right now, but you can get it from a battleship right now, so we should get battleships. They should not replace carriers by all means. The whole, this is obsolete, that's obsolete, is a dumb discussion. People still use knives, people still use swords in the modern day, we just call them knives. And bayonets, I mean, not bayonets, machetes. So yeah. Oh, right, that'd be our first video. And if you want to check out this art, check out the link in the description below. But anyway, sorry, my throat's really sore from dehydration, probably. Alright, that'd be our first video. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you watching on this video. This is to be awesome. Also, you check out the rest of the stuff in the description. Rest of the stuff in the description below. I share various sports channels. Of course, this sports channel that watching this gauge content produced. And we're showing friends for this step. And of course, always double check what I'm saying and do your own research. But and also please let me know what you think in the comments below and whatever. Get on my Discord and we can talk there, whatever makes you comfortable. Like again, like the only reasons why people say battleships are obsolete is because they never killed anything. They never killed another surface combatant during World War II, or rarely did. And they're costly, but that's not really a thing. They cost the same. They cost the same as a carrier without plane. They cost the same as a carrier, either with or without planes. I'm not quite sure. But doing shore bombardment, which is what we mainly do, it's a lot. They're cheaper because you don't gotta maintain planes. You just gotta maintain guns, which I believe would be cheaper. But anyway. Oh, that'd be it for soon. Thanks for watching, and I guess see you in a second.